So, the Ricoh GR3 is a legend among street photography shooters. It performs great APS-C size sensor, 28mm equivalent f2.8 lens. It's about $900. But there's also this on the market, the Fuji XF10. On paper, almost the same camera and half the price. Let's find out how it actually performs. I often share behind the scenes and extra material on Instagram, so if you're not following already, please click the card above. So look, I tested the GR3 in Havana, Cuba. It's a fantastic little camera, and I do actually think for the price, it's reasonably good value. But I would love to see that it has some competition for people for whom $900 is too expensive. So let's run through the specs, and it's kind of remarkable just how close they actually are. So let's start off with what's the same about these two. First of all, they're both using APS-C size sensors, 28mm equivalent f2.8 lenses, and they both have 24 megapixels, producing precisely a 6000 by 4000 pixel image. They also both have normal focus from 10 centimeters to infinity. They'll both do plus and minus 5 stops of exposure compensation, have a single SD-XC card slot, both have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth but no GPS. They have almost matching 3-inch screens that are just over 1 million pixels. They both have snap zone focusing, but the Ricoh's is significantly more comprehensive and user programmable. And they both have USB charging, but this is where things start to separate out. So the Ricoh has USB-C charging, whereas the Fuji is the older USB micro, USB 2 versus 3. So you're going to get faster transfer speeds and charging on the Ricoh. The Ricoh also has a broader stated range of ISOs, has a macro function that will let you get closer than that 10 centimeter focus. It's slimmer and it's got a neater lens design with an integrated lens cap and a fully recessed lens barrel when it's not in use. It's got a fully functioning touchscreen, even letting you work through the menus. It has 3-axis image stabilization, and it has a hot shoe. But whilst it has a hot shoe, it doesn't have a flash. They did away with that when they moved to the GR3 from the 2. Whereas the XF10 has no hot shoe, but it does still have a tiny little flash, which can be quite handy. The Fuji has an 1800 milliamp hour battery versus Ricoh's 1350, but bizarrely the battery fits in both ways, so you have a 50-50 chance of putting it in correctly. The touchscreen is nice and responsive. It's good for choosing your focus points and flipping through images, but you can't use it for adjusting the menu settings. Whilst it has got a more plasticky design, it's ever so slightly heavier than the Ricoh because it's slightly bigger in each dimension and probably the bigger battery size. And whilst it is more plasticky, really in the hand I don't notice it. I do think the leatherette covering is chintzy and tacky as hell, but I really like the proper dials on this. It's got 2 dials on top for adjusting your aperture and shutter speed when you're shooting in manual mode, whereas the Ricoh is relying on the exposure compensation toggle to do the second function. But the big bugbear on the Fuji is the lens cap that you have to then keep like this or you're gonna lose it, or be taking it on and off. Having the Ricoh, having the integrated cover is really, really handy. So if you were just comparing these on the spec sheet, which one to buy, you would go for the Ricoh if you have the $900 to spend, you're interested in that real one-handed shooting to be able to just with one hand turn it on and shoot. You want the slightly better build quality, you like the design of it. If you want the advanced zone focusing, IBIS and a hot shoe, then the Ricoh is obvious for you. But if you want to save $450 and you want a flash, that starts to put things in favor of the Fuji. It also has a better battery life. It's got a quality sensor, but you are trading off a little bit on the build quality and that zone focusing, which actually won't bother a lot of people. But that's all on spec sheet. Let's have a look at them, shoot with them, and see how they compare in the hand. So spending the day shooting with these guys side by side brings up a couple of things. The Ricoh is a more refined shooting process. The focus is quicker and definitely more accurate. This lens cap is a pain in the butt. I do need to keep it strapped on though, or I would definitely lose it. But it did mean that a few times I had it dangling over there. Do prefer the button layout on this and do love that it has the flash option, which the Ricoh doesn't. You'd have to put a separate one on. But for me, the final tell is going to be which one has better image quality. So let's take a look in studio. Okay, let's take a look at some images here in Lightroom. So we've got each of the different cameras. I got comparable shots, not exactly the same shot on each though. That's kind of impossible with a real life subject in a real world shoot. So for example, you know, her pose is slightly different, the frame is ever so slightly different, but not too different. Going through the files, in this case it is the Ricoh on the left where she's kicking back, and then the Fuji on the right. There's not a noticeable difference here other than the Fuji has warmer skin tones. I tried to match the camera settings as much as I could. Of course, this is something that you can easily fix up in post. You know, the exposure seems a little bit brighter on the Fuji as well, but pretty similar. Taking a look at our high ISO shots, these were both shot at ISO 6400. And again, there's a difference in exposure and saturation, but this time it's actually the Ricoh that's brighter on the left. There's a bigger issue at play here though. First of all, I would say neither of them are performing great at that kind of level at ISO 6400. I just wouldn't want to be using them. Overall, maybe the Ricoh is slightly better, but I feel like it's had more sharpening applied to the file. But the bigger issue here is that the Fuji has missed focus. And this happened a lot. It's focused on the back wall. I shouldn't say a lot. For a compact camera, it was doing fairly well, but the Ricoh was performing noticeably better in terms of the autofocus hit rate. Even sometimes when I was shooting long exposures on Manhattan, the Fuji would miss it. And it's a weird thing when you set a time lapse, it would focus, then do the countdown, and then focus again just before it takes the shot for each shot. And often on that second focus, it actually missed. So doing a time lapse, I found there was several where the city was poker balls rather than sharp city lights. Taking a look at some hard light examples here, a little bit off because my framing isn't exactly the same, but here in good contrasty light, I think both of them are really performing fine. Overall, I do think the image quality coming off both of them is really good. I would say overall that the Ricoh has an edge, but nowhere near a 2-to-1 edge. I would say it's maybe 10% ahead, but for the price, the Fuji is performing really, really well. And that's a theme that goes through this. I have to say, I think that the Ricoh at $900 is reasonably priced, and it's well priced. It's a good camera for the money. It performs really well and it justifies that price. At half of the price, the XF10 is definitely delivering more than half in every regard. So if you're on a budget, I would say this is fantastic value, and the Ricoh is great value, maybe slightly less good value. It is definitely the superior camera, but I don't know that it's worth double the price. Not everyone has the opportunity to shoot with things really side by side to notice the kind of small differences that I am here, but I am in that position, so I'm glad to be able to share that with you, and I hope that you find this kind of information useful. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. I put out videos every week, and we have a great community going on here. I'd love for you to be a part of it, so please do click that button and turn on notifications. You can also follow me over at Instagram _Matt Granger, and I'll see you soon with more photography gear and tutorials very, very soon.